This is the Mind Body Detox Podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom for how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Mind Body Medium, Kara Lovehart, and we're continuing our Energy Mastery series. This week, we're talking about the third eye chakra or the brow chakra. And just to recap, if you have not listened to the previous episodes in the series, I highly encourage you to go back and listen. We started with the heart center, which is the center of our beingness, our solar plexus next, which is the center of our doing. Then we talked about our throat center, which is the expression authentically of who we are in this world. And then we talked about last week, our expression of our creativity and our relationship to other in the world. Now, this particular week, the brow chakra is associated and sits in the middle of the forehead. And this is associated with the pineal gland. And sometimes certain teachings talk about it being associated with the pituitary gland. It is associated with our eyes, our vision, the head, the brain. But in general, from a perspective I see it, it's our ability to see and perceive the world from clarity, from truth. So this is a huge space within most of us humans that has distortions. And let's think about it like this. Distortions being, what beliefs do you carry about the world? And beliefs usually are carried in our brain. We carry them from a structural perspective. The brain carries those beliefs. The body carries out the behaviors of the beliefs and the emotions that we relate or feel in the body that relate to last week's sacral center, the emotions, right? But the actual beliefs and the perceptions of those beliefs are what create and make up our reality. And I believe that at this point, most of the humans I noticed are really walking around not aware of their bodies most of the time. We are in our heads a lot. We do a lot of thinking. So there's a lot of activity or imbalances and distortions in this particular area in the energy field. Now, of course, we have this epidemic of mental health issues and depression, anxiety. A lot of these issues also can stem from chemical, environmental, genetic, trauma, upbringing, different patterns that we've experienced in our lives, but how we perceive those realities and experiences. So there, of course, are biochemical markers and historical things that can happen to us that can contribute to mental health disorders. But in general, our thoughts, our beliefs, and most importantly, our perception of the world, whether we're perceiving it from clarity for what it is, or perceiving it from a perspective that is maybe detrimental or even maybe destructive to our own mental well-being. I also note that a lot of us are very much thinkers. We do have this stress response that's activated in most of us in our culture. And what happens a lot of times in that stress response is we get this need to maybe solve a problem. And we don't always have the tools or the regulation set skills to maybe sink back into our body, do some breath work, other self-care techniques and tools that we learn to center back into that heart space, like I talked about in the first episode of the series. And then we get stuck in our head. We can loop, we can hamster wheel, we can try to solve and figure out a problem, and sometimes then get stuck in that solving or not being able to come to a solution. Especially if the stress response is activated, what happens in the brain, and again, the third eye chakra, this energy center in general, is associated around all these areas around the head, the brain, the eyes. The pituitary gland is sometimes associated with this, but more likely the pineal gland. And we'll talk about that in a second. But just think about the area around the head and the eyes in general. That is this area that we're talking about and the themes around today's episode. So, of course, the brain is associated with our mental health issues, right? Of course, I said the body is associated too, but where are we normally mostly oriented in our bodies? Most of the individuals that I work with are oriented around their solar plexus and up. There's a lot of detachment maybe from the body. The activations and the energy centers and the distortions are more up in the upper part of the field. And it's because a lot of times we either get distracted and we're thinking in our mind we're somewhere else, just like maybe an experience you could have had where you're driving and you are on autopilot and then you don't really know who was driving for the last 10, 15 minutes and you checked out somewhere. That is an experience that I actually say when people say I have an out-of-body experience, there's two different types of out-of-body experiences, and that being one of them, where you're not really consciously out of body, but you've checked out and your autonomic nervous system is behind the wheel. And you're really in that headspace. When I observe someone and what's happening in their energy field when they're doing that, it's like all of their life force energy just kind of starts to pool around their headspace and sometimes even just projects outward outside of the body. So their consciousness sort of checks out for a moment. But for the most part, many of us are walking around in our day-to-day with most of our energy activation in this area. I mean, ask yourself that question. Are you thinking most of the time? How aware are you of your body throughout the day, unless you are experiencing some sort of pain or difficulty? And that is why this particular module, being imbalanced, can cause a lot of problems, not just physiologically, that it's the associations from a mind-body perspective, but just in general in our ability to perceive our world with clarity and what's truly going on, not only within us and perceive what's going on inside, having self-awareness and self-perception, but true perception about what's going on in the world around us. And I think at this time in humanity, it's so important for us to be able to see clearly, to see what is true. And with a lot of information and information overwhelm or overload, that can be very challenging. And it's a lot of processing for what? The brain and the nervous system, and the brain being associated with this center. So we have a lot of information to sift through and to determine or discern whether that information is true, false, partially true. There's a lot of these things in the world with misinformation that is creating a lot of challenges, separation and polarization and fear. And what happens when fear gets activated in our nervous system, the actual brain will start to function differently. So we can actually see over time, if we have chronic stress response for too long, the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that can help us regulate emotions, and that part of the brain will actually get bigger. It'll actually get bigger. So this fight, flight response, we can actually be more reactive and reactive without thinking first. And it's a beautiful mechanism that our body has to survive if we are in a survival situation, right? That part of the brain to say, you know what, we need to get this amygdala bigger because this person's in a really big, stress response. They're surviving. Their life is threatened every day. It helps that quick response to survive, to keep our lives safe. But if we're not really living in a situation where we're literally at war, in some countries there is that going on, but in our country, for the most part, we have safety. Now, not all populations have safety. So I will make a side note here. There is a lot of stress and human rights issues that are still going on that we're here in this space to find clarity around in this time in our culture to continue to create equality. And so that creates heightened stress responses. It's really hard if you are someone that struggled or experienced inequality, disrespect, bigotry, anything that creates dissatisfaction or feeling judged, pushed out of a group, or even just not feeling physically safe for your life. And we can have real experiences where we don't feel safe or we're actually not safe. And then we can have perceived experiences where we're actually just perceiving a threat based on history, based on something that's happened to our nervous system that's been laid down. And of course, over time, if we're in a trauma response or a threat response for too long, what else happens? Many different things happen to the nervous system. But what's curious is there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus. And that part of the brain, again, will shrink. And that part of the brain is associated with memory and formulation of memory and recall of memory. So this is why if you're someone that's been around someone who's had a lot of stress or chronic stress in their life or even trauma, that sometimes when they recall things, they are a little bit distorted or maybe not completely what actually happened, but it doesn't mean that, we want to invalidate someone's experience of if they are recalling something. Whatever they experienced subjectively for them was what they experienced, right? But what actually was happening is something that may not be truly clear, especially when our perception gets distorted because of the stress response. And our stress response, of course, is what I'm like all here for in all ways, for all the holistic tools and modalities to learn to manage, because this energy center, I feel like, is the center of control. It is the place to get behind the wheel, because when we can not only bring ourself inside and have awareness of our thinking, which is this energy center, right? The brow center, our thinking, our thoughts, and we think in pictures. So that is really what's associated with this particular energy center. I have a lot of folks who really want to activate or work with their intuition. And I'm very clairvoyant myself. So clairvoyance is this ability to see visually in your surroundings or in your mind's eye, images that relate to the unconscious or the subconscious or spirit, guides, God, higher power, your intuition, whatever you want to label it. To me, it's just this connecting point between the unconscious and the conscious or the superconscious. And this is where we can get tapped in and get information within ourselves. And I feel very passionate about bringing everyone that I meet as much information I can, if they're interested and open, to want to tap into that themselves. Because if you can then find clarity and answers within yourself, and balancing intuition and logic, right? Logic as well, we can then really create clarity, and that clarity can abolish distortions in our perception of who we are, who we think we are, and maybe other perspectives we have of other people, and create a much more foundational playing field for making choices, making changes in our life, and creating the life we want to live. So with this center, we also have the ability to dream or to daydream or to have a vision internally. So if I tell you to think about a hummingbird that's pink right now, how well or how clearly in your mind's eye, with eyes open or eyes closed, can you visualize that hummingbird? Okay. So I talked about in the last episode how we evolve. So our first sense that's developed for communication is our sense of touch, our somatic sense. So the feelings of rocking in the amniotic fluid inside your mom's womb, the ability to sense or feel pressure on your skin. This is our first connecting point to the physical world when we don't really know what's going on, right? We have no idea. That is our first sense. And then we start to hear. We might hear our mother's voice, our father's voice, noises. And then when we are born, we see light. Light comes into the eyes, and we're not able to see clearly yet, but we're hearing, we're feeling, we're tasting, putting things in our mouth at that time. And then we start to orient ourselves to other, to mom, to dad. We're making noises, we're expressing ourselves. And then we start to orient in pictures. So we start to see and hear things around us and identify that's mom's face, that's mom's smell, that's mom's voice, right? We don't know words yet for mom. We don't have that throat chakra, that development of the actual identification in logical words, but we do have pictures. So if we were to communicate with you as a baby and you did not know words yet, we would have to use pictures, right? And that's what we do when we are helping a little toddler learn. We have flashcards. They say dog, you have a picture of a dog. So if you can understand that we think in pictures before we think in words, then it's important to understand that when we have our thoughts, we're trying to change a belief system or a pattern, that how we orient in pictures, what pictures are associated with thoughts and patterns and memories, is really important foundationally to change those. And of course, when we change those, it does change our emotions, our behaviors, and all of that. One of the things that I found really interesting in one of my trainings is when we have an overactive trauma response and the brain has not oriented correctly. So we are maybe months, years of chronic stress. We haven't learned how to downregulate. There are, of course, a lot of things that happen to our sleep, right? We can have disruptions in our sleep, the inability to sleep deeply, or the opposite, where we sleep a lot. And you can have a lot of dreams happening or no dreams at all. And in general, we want to make sure that in this particular energy center, having it online and on board is to make sure that we are dreaming and we are understanding or processing our dreams at least, because that's the unconscious mind processing your day. And when I start working with people who want to develop their intuition, we do look at understanding and processing journaling dreams and looking at what they might mean from a symbolic standpoint, because this is, again, the entry point from the conscious and the unconscious or subconscious mind. So this energy center in general is talking about the clarity of vision that we have, whether it's clear vision in our dreams, like what are we dreaming literally, or what is our figurative dreams? What do we dream about? What do we envision for our life? Do we have a clear vision of who we are, a clear vision of where we're going, a clear vision of other people in our life? Because if we don't have a clear vision of other people in our lives, we have distortions and projections, then we can have expectations of people and they let us down, right? So this energy center has so much to do with our reality and how we can create it or recreate it. Also, the balance of logic. So if we, again, are not able to balance and downregulate our stress response, the parts of the brain that are problem solving, intuitive, innovative, also logic, the executive functioning, our ability to function, are not going to work as properly when we're in high stress response. So this can inhibit not just our intuition, but also our logic, our reasoning, our ability to problem solve, our ability to focus, and the increase in ADHD and attention deficit types of symptoms and diagnoses is something that I've really found interesting, especially when, in general, if you are in a stress response, high stress response situation, not just if it's your environment, but if it might be your foods, your diet, certain things that are stressful for the nervous system, and just our culture. If you put an organism in an environment that is very stressful, the brain is already naturally going to orient to being maybe more scattered because it needs to sense the environment for its survival. It's not going to sleep as well, so that's going to affect the ability to perform and to focus. It's not going to be able to deep sleep or get into those deeper stages for regenerative sleep, and maybe dreaming isn't happening, or dreaming is happening all night, and there's not a processing of dreams or processing of conscious or unconscious behaviors, life experiences, traumas, or things that are going on. So a lot of brain imbalance stuff can happen. We also can see inflammation in the brain from our diet, from gut imbalances. And this, of course, is associated with a lot of mental health issues. And then, of course, we have Alzheimer's disease. We have cognitive function, brain fog, memory issues. But there are a lot of other things that we can see with this energy center being imbalanced. So every time I talk about these energy centers, I feel like I get really excited about why this one's important. Now, the truth is they really are all important to be in balance and understand how they function together, almost like an orchestra. But I think that this one I find more concerning that it's out of balance because of the polarization and the war consciousness that we see on our planet. Not just war consciousness towards others, but towards ourselves. You know, this misperception of who we are, the either disassociation that we have towards our world, or even orienting ourselves to be very hyper logical, hyper scientific, black and white in our thinking. Things have to always be proven. And I am someone that I love science, and I think that it's really important to have research, but also to understand that if you are looking to prove something because of this need to feel safe, and then there's a difference between being curious and logical to look at what can we find out the reasonings behind a mechanism of why something works, but also being open to the creative, innovative thought processes that happen. But if we're oriented from a stress response and we are black and white in our thinking, that is what happens when the brain's not functioning properly. It can definitely be a a personality type that we might carry. I know that I have people in my life that are more black and white in their thinking. And it's something from years of patterning of not having a space where they might be safe, or they might just be people that are very logical and not creative necessarily in their thinking. And creativity and intuition, balance with logic, is to me a superpower, because then you have the best of both worlds. So for people who are interested in expanding their intuition, having spiritual experiences, heightened sense of perception, heightened states of consciousness, this is the energy center you want to work with. But we also want to balance everything else, because if someone's going off too far into spiritual land, we also see the potential for spiritual psychosis, mental health disorders, staying in touch with reality. And that's why I find it really important that when people talk about the third eye chakra, they talk about seeing spirits and having these heightened states of awareness and perception and deeply meditative states, which are amazing. And of course, this is what I'm here for. I am here for all these expanded states of awareness. There is so much out there, so much in there, should I say, that we don't even know about, that we have not had experiences of yet, that there's just more to life. There's more to this reality than we think and what we can perceive. And that's why I think finding clarity in what is true for us and what is true in the world and what is true in reality, or quote unquote our reality, is really important, because that's when we can then understand the mechanism behind how we can change it. So there's a lot more to this energy center. I feel like I could talk about this one probably for hours and hours and hours. And I talk a lot more about it in our programs that we have, and ways that we can balance it. Things in our environmental toxins that distort it and create issues in the functioning of the pineal gland, the organs, the dissociations that happen when we have environmental toxins in our bodies. So many more things that I dive into and that we love to talk about. But the balance of this logic and intuition is key for this energy center. We want to really help down regulate stress, or else we get these cognitive distortions and the inability to actually find balance in this. Creating our reality, being able to envision, think big, dream big, and be able to interpret our dreams, whether they're literal dreams or the dreams that we are envisioning for ourselves. And we're able to see clearly what it is that we need to do to move forward. Being able to have a clear perception of ourselves, the world around us, so that we can contribute to this world in a non-polarizing way. And we can help to other people to clear their distortions as well. If you have a lot of overactivity in this, you may get headaches, you may get symptoms of congestion around your eyes, you may have symptoms around brain health, mental health, cognitive function, your dreams, your sleep, sleep disturbances, sleep issues, and of course, your ability to see clearly, distortions in your perception of yourself, and maybe the inability to focus or stay focused on tasks, maybe being scattered. It also could come up as black and white thinking, maybe being overly focused, tunnel vision. So that can also be another thing that's experienced with this energy center, imbalanced. But what we want to see when it's balanced is the ability to be able to function in logic and intuition. See clearly who you are, who you aren't, and people around you clearly, so you don't have expectations on people that are misperceptions. And the ability to keep mental health issues at bay by tapping into your spirituality, tapping into your source, tapping into your clarity in your vision, so you know who you are and who you aren't. And so you can take the inner visions or the inner pictures of yourself, and even those thoughts and belief systems and patterns that have laid down your reality, and be able to change them at will. So next week, we're going to talk about the root center, and that relates to connection to our physical bodies, the physical world, money, resources, time management, energy management in general, and how we organize and orient ourselves in the physical world. So thank you guys so much for listening, and be well until next time, my friends. Thank you for listening to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. If you love this podcast, share it with others and leave us a review. Your reviews help us more than you know, and supports us continuing to make episodes and being heard from all over the world. You can also follow the link in our show notes to submit a topic that you would like to hear on the show.